Good evening. I have a quick request to start, which is if you're willing and able, especially if you're in the chairs, can we come a little bit more center and forward just to create a bit more intimacy? Thank you. Feels cozier. Hi, Roshi. Thank you, in particular for trusting me with this seat. And I want to quickly say hi to my mom, who's online and just had surgery yesterday and is recovering well, last I heard. So I hope you're still recovering well. And I wanted to thank also, I gave a talk 3 weeks ago, and it was my first talk. And I just got all these hugs and comments and text messages, emails, and even a handwritten letter. And so thank you all for that support. It really, felt like we do this together, and give these talks together. So thank you all for that. And today, I'll be speaking about the Diamond Sutra, the Vajracchedika. And I want to start with a passage from Master Ma, who was a 8th century Tang Dynasty Chan master and a kind of towering figure in his time. And those of you who were with us in the fall may recall that I gave a talk as part of my Shuso ceremony on the koan, ordinary mind is way. And that's a conversation between two other teachers later on in the lineage. But ordinary mind is way is a teaching that, as far as we can track it back, began with Master Ma. So this is the source of that teaching. He says, to abide in way, don't bother with cultivation. Just keep free of contamination. What is contamination? Mind hemmed in by life and death. Mind fabricating its little certainties. That is contamination. If you want to fathom way, if you want to see through it with absolute and immediate clarity, it's easy. Ordinary mind is way. In this ordinary mind, there is no fabrication, no yes this or no that, no clinging to or letting go, no short-lived or long-lived, no commoner and no sage. The Nirvana Sutra says, the practice of bodhisattvas is not the practice of commoners and not the practice of sages. It is instead exactly this here, right now. Walking or standing, sitting or sleeping, simply move in accord with whatever moment the loom of origin unfurls, integral to the 10,000 things in their vast transformations. That is way. So for me, that's what we're talking about today. And all of its utter simplicity and, at least in my lived experience, total complexity. It is instead exactly this here, right now. And this came up for me as I was writing this talk. The title of the talk is Nowhere Else to Go. And I'll talk a little bit about my sources in a moment, but I was pretty compulsively diving into 3 different commentaries with this story of who am I to sit up here and speak to all of you about the Diamond Sutra? I'm not a scholar, and I'm not a Zen master. I don't think I've had any kind of extraordinary realizations. And it was really, my partner Sarah heard quite a bit about this. Thank you for your patience. It was really kind of crippling what I was doing to myself. All of these fabrications. And all of this kind of looking, it's somewhere else. I need to memorize this, I need to memorize that, I need to be an expert in this or that. And where else is there to go? It's kind of where I came back to. I did a bunch of work to prepare, and I think I have something to say, and I hope it's of some use. And it'll come through this body, this practitioner, this person who's living a life that's at least attempting to move towards this practice of exactly this here, right now. And so I was left with this question, which I'll use to open the talk and then move into some context, which is, do we have the courage and the faith and the Dharma in ourselves, the patience to stay right here, experiencing, receptive and relaxed? So that was the question I was left with stepping into this talk. So I'll talk a little bit about context and history of this teaching, and then I'll read a bit from it and then offer some commentary and some closing. So as I mentioned, in terms of sources, what we'll read from today is Mu Song's translation and commentary. I was also working with Thich Nhat Hanh's version and Red Pine's version. And Kodo, in speaking about this series of talks that we're giving on these sutras, shared that we just this aspiration that we hear these texts, we experience these texts, maybe we sit with them. And so I really encourage you, if this sounds at all, maybe interesting isn't the right word, but opens anything up for you, to go to one of these sources. And they're each different. Mu Song is more of an academic text, my read of it, and goes into the history of Buddhism. And for our scientists in the room, also goes into some quantum physics. That's interesting to you. Red Pine really, to me, has this sense of kind of devotional Mahayana reading, and he also has studied 53 commentaries from historical masters. So you get like 54 for the price of one with Red Pine. And then Thich Nhat Hanh very much, to me, has this sense of, how does this apply to our everyday life? It's much shorter commentary, and I'll read a little bit of his questions later on. As Dinan shared with us last week, the title of this sutra is the Vajracchedika, literally the Diamond Cutter Sutra. Thich Nhat Hanh refers to it or translates it as the diamond that cuts through illusion. And we're unsure of who wrote these words down, who compiled them. We've been looking at the Prajnaparamita literature, and the general time period of when we think, or scholars think, these texts came to be. The Prajnaparamita Sutra in 8,000 lines, which we started with, was sometime between 100 BCE and 100 CE. And then in the 200 years after that, those texts expanded. That text expanded to 18,000 verses, 25,000 verses, 100,000 verses. And then about 200 years after that, they got shorter. So we started with 8,000 lines, we went up to 100,000 lines, and then we came back down to the Diamond Sutra, which is generally about 300 lines, and the Heart Sutra, which is 25 lines. And to me, there's this fascinating argument, maybe, about the source of this teaching. So Red Pine says the Buddha is the source of this teaching. And it was a teaching that was not publicly given because it was, most of those in the assembly were not ready to receive this teaching. And so it was only a teaching that was given orally to advanced students. And so from the death of the Buddha around the 3rd century CE through when this appears, maybe around 300 BCE, the death of the Buddha, to when this appears around 300 CE, it's just orally transmitted to advanced students. And then someone writes it down. Musang contends that actually it was written by Mahayana practitioners in a time when different schools of Buddhism were splintering and establishing themselves. It used the literary traditions of the Pali Canon to lend legitimacy to these words. But actually, these are not the words of the Buddha. So we don't know. And I kind of love that. No matter who composed it or wrote it or whose words they are, it has lived on. We are reading it now in, I think it's 2025. And Musang speaks of it as, along with the Heart Sutra, the two most revered, influential, and commonly recited texts in Zen monasteries throughout East Asia. Come on in, Shosho. Come on. And I want to speak briefly about two of our Tang Dynasty Zen masters who had experiences with this text. The first is Huineng, who heard the line, "A bodhisattva should develop a mind that functions freely without depending on anything or any place," when he was a boy in the marketplace collecting wood. And this led to a spontaneous awakening. And then later in his life, when he goes and practices with Hongren, on the night of his transmission, Hongren reads the full Diamond Sutra, and it's said that he has a full awakening at hearing the full Diamond Sutra. And Huineng is one of the people who comments on this in the Red Pine edition and writes, "This sutra is present in the nature of all beings. Those who don't look within read only the words, while those who become aware of their own minds realize this sutra does not consist of words." And that's Huineng. And then we have Deshan, one of my favorite stories of the Tang ancestors. He was a scholar of the Diamond Sutra. He spent 20 years writing commentaries on them, and then heard about these barbarians in the south of China who were talking about transmission outside the teaching. And so he put his commentaries, kind of in outrage, put his commentaries in his backpack and traveled south on foot to correct the error of the teaching in the South. And as he's nearing the temple, he stops and has an interaction with an old tea lady who stumps him with a question on the Diamond Sutra. And I won't go into that koan, but it's case 28 in the Mumon Kan, if you're interested. I believe it's also in Zenshin's Book of Koans about women. And I want to read a little bit of the, I'm sorry, that's not case 28. I forget which one that is, but I'm going to read from case 28 a little bit for us. So this is when Deshan gets to the monastery. He's traveled with his commentaries. And we read in case 28, Deshan hungrily questioned Longtan into the night. Finally, Longtan said, "The night is deep. You should have left by now." Deshan bowed in homage, raised the blinds, and left. But seeing it was dark out, he stepped back in and said, "It's pitch dark out there." Longtan lit a paper lantern candle and offered it to him. Then, just as Deshan reached out to take it, Longtan blew it out. At this, Deshan was suddenly awakened. And the next day, in the Dharma hall, Deshan says, "Even if you understand all the intricacies of dark enigma itself," this is a David Hinton translation, in case you're wondering about the language, "even if you understand all the intricacies of dark enigma itself, it's barely a hair's breadth adrift in the vast emptiness of this cosmos. And even if you comprehend through and through that loom of origins at the heart of things, it's barely a drop tossed into endless seas." Having said this, he lit all of his commentaries and notes on fire, bowed reverently, and walked out. And this may be the first recorded mic drop in history. So I share this and read this as we are about to go into the text, because if, like me, you're kind of academically achieving, logical, rational mind wants to pin this down and figure it out and cut it up into pieces, well, it didn't work for me. And it led to quite a bit of vexation. We have these masters who are inviting us, I think, into something not different from that, but beyond that. Not exclusive of that. But what else? And so as we receive this together and explore it together, and should you open it, for me, it's like, okay, so what is underneath? It's all already here. Can I trust that? Can I believe that? And if it is, what is getting in the way? And maybe, how do I put down all this clutter that I'm creating? Can I have a clock, Eva? Thank you. Great. So the last thing I'll say is, among the commentaries I read, there was a disagreement about what the kind of heart of the sutra is. So Red Pine says the first section is the teaching. And Diamond read that to us last week, and I'll go through it today. The first section is the teaching. It's the Buddha showing the teaching. and everything else is him explaining the teaching. And Thich Nhat Hanh says the first 5 sections are the argument or the teaching, the complete teaching. And then everything else is explaining those first 5 sections. Musang says the first 13 sections are the original teaching. And everything else is, I believe in his words, like inelegant addenda to the original teaching that were spliced in over time. So we don't know. Today, I want to read the first 5 sections so we can hear this together. And it's only going to take 5 minutes. And my invitation is that we all sit up and allow our awakened mind to arise and receive this. And then I'll talk a little bit about it. And I'll give the suggestion that Thich Nhat Hanh gives right before the text begins. Try to understand the sutra from your own experiences and your own suffering. It is helpful to ask, what do these teachings of the Buddha have anything to do with my daily life? Thus have I heard, at one time the Buddha was staying at Anathapindika's garden in Jeta Grove in the city of Shravasti. With him was a large gathering of 1,250 monks and bodhisattva mahasattvas. Early in the morning, when the mealtime came, the Buddha put on his robe and, holding his bowl, entered the great city of Shravasti where he begged for food. Having finished begging from door to door, he came back to his own seat in the garden and took his meal. When this was done, he put away his robe and bowl, washed his feet, spread his seat, and sat down, mindfully fixing his attention in front of him. The Venerable Subhuti, who was among the assembly, rose from his seat, bared his right shoulder, set his right knee on the ground, and respectfully folding his hands, addressed the Buddha thus: "It is wonderful, world-honored one, that the Tathagata thinks so much of all the bodhisattvas and instructs them so well. World-honored one, in the case of a son or daughter of a good family who arouses the thought for the supreme awakening, how should they abide in it, and how should they keep their thoughts under control?" The Buddha replied, "Well said indeed, O Subhuti. As you say, the Tathagata thinks very much of all the bodhisattvas and instructs them well. But now listen attentively, and I will tell you how those who have set out on the bodhisattva path should abide in it, and how they should keep their thoughts under control. So be it, world-honored one. I wish to listen to you." The Buddha said to Subhuti, "All the bodhisattva mahasattvas who undertake the practice of meditation should cherish one thought only. When I attain perfect wisdom, I will liberate all sentient beings in every realm of the universe, whether they be egg-born, womb-born, moisture-born, or miraculously born. Those with form, those without form, those with perception, those without perception, and those with neither perception nor non-perception. So long as any form of being is conceived, I must allow it to pass into the eternal peace of nirvana, into that realm of nirvana that leaves nothing behind, and to attain final awakening. And yet, although immeasurable, innumerable, and unlimited beings have been liberated, truly, no being has been liberated. Why? Because no bodhisattva who is a true bodhisattva entertains such concepts as a self, a person, a being, or a living soul. Thus, there are no sentient beings to be liberated and no self to attain perfect wisdom. Furthermore, Subhuti, in the practice of generosity, a bodhisattva should be unsupported. They should practice generosity without regard to sight, sound, touch, flavor, smell, or any thought that arises in it. Subhuti, thus should a bodhisattva practice generosity without being supported by any notion of a sign. Why? When a bodhisattva practices generosity without being supported by any notion of a sign, their merit will be beyond conception. Subhuti, what do you think? Can you measure the space extending eastward? No, world-honored one, I cannot. Subhuti, can you measure the space extending toward the south, or west, or north, or above, or below? No, world-honored one, I cannot. Subhuti, so it is with the merit of a bodhisattva who practices generosity without cherishing any notion of a sign. It is beyond measure like space. Subhuti, a bodhisattva should persevere one-pointedly in this instruction. Subhuti, what do you think? Is it possible to recognize the Tathagata by means of bodily marks? No, world-honored one. And why? When the Tathagata speaks of the bodily marks, he speaks of the no possession of no marks. The Buddha said to Subhuti, all that has a form is an illusory existence. When the illusory nature of form is perceived, the Tathagata is recognized. So let's take a breath and let that land. Somehow I only have 15 minutes left already. It's amazing how fast time goes up here. And so I also sat with Thich Nhat Hanh's question. And just want to share with you some of where, some of what I saw. What does this have to do with my daily life? Diamond spoke last week about that first chapter, which was about the Buddha going on alms round, coming back, eating, washing his feet, laying out his seat, and sitting. And she mentioned that the kind of beauty that this sutra starts with embodiment, with action. And I appreciated that also, and also was struck by, this is the Buddha, the Shakyamuni Buddha. And this simple beginning to this sutra, this simple and humble life. He's with 1,250 monks, and he goes out begging for food. He has his attendants and all these monks, and he washes his own feet. He puts his bowl and robes away. And sometimes some of the Mahayana sutras I've read begin with these kind of cosmic world, huge, mind-expanding events. And this one is so everyday, so ordinary. And then we have the Bodhisattva vow. So long as any form of being is conceived, I must allow it to pass into the eternal peace of nirvana. And this was a translation choice that isn't in the other versions, but this sense of I must allow it to pass. It's kind of beautiful to me. And I'll say more about that in a moment. But then we get, and yet, although immeasurable, innumerable, and unlimited beings have been liberated, truly no being has been liberated. No bodhisattva who is a true bodhisattva entertains such concepts as a self, a person, a being, or a living soul. Thus, there are no sentient beings to be liberated and no self to attain perfect wisdom. And so what I hear in this is this kind of creative paradox between compassion, this bodhisattva vow, and wisdom, the emptiness or the boundlessness, the no beings. I vow to liberate all beings, and yet no beings have been liberated. And the calculating mind in me is like, well, I should keep count or something. I should know I'm doing a good job, right? How will I know if I'm doing this right? And so where do we stand? In the middle of that. In the middle of this vow. And also this view, this wisdom view that there are no beings. In the Platform Sutra, Huineng says, "Good friends, as for I vow to save all beings, no matter how numberless, it isn't Huineng who does the saving. Good friends, every being you can think of saves themselves with their own nature in their own bodies." And so I go back to this sense of the creation of a self. And we have entertained such concepts as a self, a person, a being, or a living soul. I went down quite a rabbit hole with the Sanskrit terms. These, as far as I can understand, are technical terms in Buddhist psychology. And all three commentators translate them a little bit differently and have them in a slightly different order. And I was really trying to pin them down, and I failed. But what I did get to is these are the ways that we create a sense of separation, a sense of division in our lived experience. Everything flowing from this self. This is me. This is mine. I am this. And I'm curious, in the last 24 hours, who's had some thought that somehow was related to this is me, this is mine, or I am this. Jiryu was first to have his hand up. Kodo looked perplexed. You know, I love this in part related to the Bodhisattva vow, this sense of I'm a Bodhisattva, or I'm a helper. I do good things. And to hear the way that that injection of an ego, at least my experience, gets in the way, creates a kind of, Roshi often uses the word residue, creates a twist in our intention, a motivation underneath that maybe is about me. How do I look doing this? And so to have this vow and also to rest in this sense of just meeting whatever is in front of us without this strong sense of self. And I have a story here that I want to tell, and it's about one of our residents and this creation of a sense of self. He gave me permission to share this, and it's kind of silly, but I love it. And it's a kitchen story, which those of you who know me know I have a deep appreciation for kitchen practice. It's very brief. So this wonderful resident is in the kitchen and he's making pitas for the first time. And there's a challenge about it for him. And so the first couple pitas, I don't know, maybe we have this experience with pancakes too. The first couple pitas are not so great, but there's this focus, there's this attention, kind of, I'll say non-separation because that's the language we're using. There's just making pitas. And all of a sudden he gets into this groove. And the pitas are really beautiful, perfect pitas. And all of a sudden, kind of thought bubble jumps up. And the first one is like, wow, I am really cool. And I am really good at making pitas. And then a second thought bubble popped up. And this is my favorite one of like, am I too cool for everybody else in the kitchen right now? Am I like too much? Am I too good at making pitas? And this internal push and pull starts to begin. And all of a sudden, the next 7 pitas torched. And for me, it's such a just simple, beautiful example. The beautiful teaching of Samu practice. How flipping pitas, for me at least, can give us insight into the Diamond Sutra. What it's like simply to verb, to make, to be making pitas. And then what happens when we insert that subjectivity? And a fear of mine can be in this, well, if I don't have a sense of me and you, I can't, it won't be right. I need that, a kind of linguistic creation in order for this to happen. But not the case, at least in this story. We had the perfect pitas. The linguistic creation led to torched pitas. So this is this vow, this creative tension between, for me, compassion to liberate all beings and wisdom, that there are no beings. The last time I spoke, I talked about this 4th section, generosity, and my own kitchen story, and being in the kitchen and really thinking, having a lot of anger and resentment because it was practice period and I was in there so much and working, this was my story, working so much harder than everybody else and nobody was behaving the way I wanted them to. And this sense of, I am doing this for you and you are not behaving the way I want you to. And therefore, there's something wrong with you. All of you. And I shared this with Sensei Shinzan during a Daisan, and he just looked at me and said, you know, you're the problem. And that was a strong moment for us. And then I felt very seen by Thich Nhat Hanh, who in his commentary says, if we are washing dishes and thinking of others who are enjoying themselves doing nothing, we cannot enjoy washing the dishes. We may have a few clean dishes afterwards, but our happiness is smaller than 1 teaspoon. If, however, we wash dishes with a serene mind, our happiness will be boundless. This is already liberation. So I'll share two more things. This line, when the illusory nature of form is perceived, that the Tathagata is recognized. Reams have been written on this, and I have 2 minutes. So I can't say very much at all. For me, this is pointing towards the way that we fix each other and ourselves, the way that we cage each other and ourselves in. I'm like this. You're like that. You always do this. You're always this way. This kind of narrowing of view, this lack of realization of the depth and complexity and just everything that went into this moment, this manifestation. All of these beings who aren't beings in this room. My words, which are my father's words and my mother's words, my teacher's words, and the, for me, incredible love that comes when we let all of that go. We allow for this body, for all of these bodies, the kind of full flowering in each moment, the fullness of presence, the fullness of manifestation, with this sense of kind of respect and curiosity and wonder. And to do that, which I'm terrible at a lot of the time, but to do that for me as the kind of essence of this final piece, which is only chapter 5 of 32 of this teaching. So it is 6:30, and I'll end with a line from Huang Po, who was asked some version of, how do I do this? And it's nice and all. It sounds great. So how do I do this? And Huang Po said, right now, thought following thought after thought, just don't dwell in it. Thank you all.